Are you looking for true personal freedom? The freedom to design a life you truly desire? Then you're absolutely in the right place. True personal freedom comes from when you take 100% responsibility and control of your money and your mind. Here you're going to learn ideas, tips, and wisdom that's going to help you bridge the gap from where you are now to your dream life in the future. My name is Randy Wilson, and welcome to the RichMind podcast.
Welcome to the RichMind podcast. Today, I want to discuss a topic that hopefully will bring some value to you today. One question when I'm interviewing folks that seems to resonate with some people that I thought would be super valuable to kind of give you my list. But one of those questions is, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self and go back then to and know then what you've learned and know now, what is one thing that you wish you could share with that 20-year-old version of yourself? And I've had some fantastic answers, and I'm super excited for you to hear more of them. But today I want to share, I came up with 16 separate topics, 16 separate things that are things that I wish I would have known when I was 20 or in my 20s. That has taken me a long time to figure out on my own, that I want to share with you today. So as you know, this podcast is centered around the idea that personal development, along with financial education, is the secret to a lifestyle that you truly desire. That personal freedom that you are, I would assume, if you're listening to me at this point, that you're looking for. You're looking for some financial freedom. You're looking for some time freedom. You might be interested in starting a new business or a business in general, and you're looking for some tips and some tricks to get some of those things started. And when you combine the personal development, the mindset, along with some key financial education pieces, once you do that, the world will open up to you faster than you can ever imagine. So today, as I mentioned, I have a list. These are not in necessarily any particular order. These are just a list that I have written down here in front of me that I want to share. I'll read them off, and then I will just give a little bit of information about them. I won't go too deep because these are the topics that we'll be discussing in the future episodes of the podcast. So if I'm getting through these, and if you have questions about any of them, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and we can obviously have some discussion offline. So let's dive in. So let's start with the personal development piece. So here are 8 separate topics, separate things that I've discovered over my, let's call it, I'll be 49 this coming year. So you can do the math. So over the last 25, 30 years, that I've discovered that I wish I would have known back then. So the first being that we all have, and I say we all because I definitely include myself in this, usually have a core wound or a sabotage pattern that shows up anytime we run up against any kind of resistance. So the key to that is to identify what that core wound is. And as that feeling or those emotions creep up into your life, to take control of those. And we will get a little bit deeper into that. We'll talk about core wounds. I'll share some stories about what my core wound is, how I've used different techniques to try to combat that, but we'll get a little bit deeper into that. So the first message is a sabotage pattern and understanding your core wound. The second is associations. And I have written down here, who are your 5? So I was taught by the late, great Jim Rohn that you will become the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. So if you're hanging around with 5 successful people or 4 other successful people, you will become the 5th. If you're hanging around with 4 wealthy people, you will become the 5th, the average of the 5th, or the average of the group, I should say. So you need to decide where you want to be, who you want to become, because by doing that, you will then decide who you want to associate with. And that is something we will be talking about that also. So the next one is the process that I've determined to get yourself from basically a beginning of a process all the way through almost to completion, or all the way through to completion. And that is to it's 5 different words here. So we've got desire, decision, discipline, determination, and destination. So we'll dive into what which one of those words means, and how you can implement a strategy to achieve greater things in your life. The next being is more life, the more life principle. So a mentor of mine, David Nagel, talks frequently about more life, that the essence of nature is to continuously grow. Everything is always striving to become more, to become bigger, to become better. And if you're holding yourself back, that's a self-imposed limitation that isn't necessarily true. And you can see that in nature. So we'll talk about that, what that means, how you can implement some certain things into your life. But the key thing is to understand that everything in life, from the smallest tree to the human, the goal in nature is for more life. Next, the magic word. Earl Nightingale, one of the earliest mentors of mine in the realm of personal development, talked about the magic word. And that magic word is attitude. Attitude is the magic word. And I can hear him saying that in my mind. I've listened to that program so many times. I can hear him and his voice saying that over and over and over. We'll get into where that program is, where you can find and get access to that program. We'll talk a little bit more, but the magic word being attitude. Next being become more. So every day, this kind of goes along with the more life principle, but every day striving to become more. It doesn't have to be a lot more, just more, better at whatever you're choosing to do at that moment. It can be anything. Just striving to be the best version of yourself in every part of your life, becoming more. So the last of this series and the personal development that I have is to seek answers from within versus looking for answers from without. So the mistake I've made in my life for a long time is I've looked for things outside of myself for answers. So what I mean by that is that your ability to choose, your ability to create ideas and use your imagination, that is the secret powers that you have to accomplish anything you desire in your life. And we'll get into more details about that when we have that discussion. But just understand that the answers that you're seeking are from within and not necessarily from without. And what I mean by without is outside of you, from other sources outside of your current inner being. Okay, so let's move on to some financial education. So these are the things from a financial education standpoint. As I mentioned, they're not in any particular order. This is just, these are things that have helped me achieve greater success in my financial life. These are things that I was unaware of relatively short period of time ago, probably in the last 10 to 15 years. These are things that I've learned from different mentors that I'm excited to share with you. The first being is what I'm going to call the wealth formula. I was not introduced to the wealth formula early in my life at all. And I actually heard this in a conference that I was attending, and I will get into detail about that conference. But that wealth formula is businesses, assets, and lifestyle. So as I mentioned, we will get into more detail about that. So when you hear the topic of the wealth formula and the businesses, assets, and lifestyle, we'll get into more of that in detail and how that was hugely impactful in my life, and hopefully it will be in yours as well. The next being is the banking system and understanding the basics of the fractional reserve banking system and what that means to you and your money, your currency, your life. Without basic understanding of what the banking system is, how the banking system operates, you're very much disadvantaged. Once you begin to understand what the banking system is, how the banking system operates, you can then begin to make decisions that will impact your financial status relatively quickly. And we'll get into some basic ideas and potentially even down the road into some more detailed concepts as far as how to get better in understanding the banking system. We will talk about what is real money versus currency. As I stated just a second ago, we in technicality deal in currency. We call it money, but in actuality, it's currency. There's a difference. We'll talk about that difference. I'm not going to get into that today, but just understand that there is a difference. We'll talk about what real money is, and we will talk about the difference between that real money and what we use on a daily basis that we call money, which is currency. Okay, we will then talk about the US dollar and understanding that the dollar in its current existence is debt. It's borrowed into existence. That might sound a little bit overwhelming hearing that, but the idea of getting out of debt, that the country will ever get out of its debt, is not necessarily a true statement. We could do better with using the debt, but we can't control the government. But we can control our own debt, right? But understanding that dollars are debt, and dollars are created by loans, and they are borrowed into existence. And I'll leave it there for now. We will get into more detail in the future about that. We will talk about the purchasing power of the dollar. One key thing that's been discussed in the last, I would call it 12 months or so, maybe a little bit longer, is inflation. And I've been studying inflation for years, probably since about 2010. I've been trying to figure out what inflation is, how to take advantage of it, because you can. You don't have to necessarily be put in a bind when it comes to inflation, how to hedge against inflation, topics that we will discuss. But the idea is to understand that it's the purchasing power of the dollar is what's important. And that has to do with inflation. And we will discuss that. We'll also talk about cash flow versus capital gains. Most folks in the what I would call the quote unquote normal part of society look for capital gains. They're looking to buy something low and sell something high. That's capital gains. Smart investors, I'm not saying they don't do and look for capital gains, but their biggest focus is on cash flow. They're looking for investments that will pay them over and over and over and over. When you bundle that with some debt, that's when it could become rocket fuel. But that's where you have to get educated. And those are the things we're going to discuss on this program. So just understand that there is a huge difference between cash flow and capital gains. And when you shift your mind over to thinking more about cash flow versus capital gains, that's when your life will begin to change as well. We will talk about leverage. We talked about debt. Debt is leverage, but there are other forms of debt. And we will talk about OPM. We will talk about OPT, and we will talk about OPS. And what those stand for is OPM represents other people's money. OPT is other people's time. And OPS is other people's systems. And we'll talk about how you can learn how to use any or all three of those things to greatly benefit you and your financial situation and status in a relatively short period of time. So leverage is very important. And last but not least, when it comes to the financial education piece, we're going to discuss that money is an idea, and it comes from solving a problem. So what do I mean by that? Money is an idea. So you can have an idea for a business. Great, that's fantastic. But that idea then has to solve a problem for someone else in the marketplace. And the marketplace will then tell you whether or not that idea has value because they will be willing to trade dollars, currency, money for that product or service, for that idea. That's called a sale. That's what transfers money from one entity to the next, is sales. But money is nothing more than an idea. This podcast was an idea. Will it generate income? That remains to be seen. But in the meantime, it's an idea that I'm going to present it and give it out to the marketplace. And the marketplace will give me feedback, whether that's through currency or whether it's through verbal communication or whatever. And then I can make the decision whether or not it's valuable enough, whether I'm solving a big enough problem through my idea. And then I can pivot, I can change. But just for today, just understand that money is an idea. And the idea has to solve a problem in the marketplace. And when that happens, that's when a transaction called a sale can happen. And that's when you can accumulate more dollars or money, currency, whatever term you want to put on it. So that's it. That's a list of things that I've learned over my almost nearly 30 years of existence. I've tried to implement any, if not all, of things into my life. I've had some trial and error. I've had some success. I've had some failures. But the whole idea for this episode and the episodes upcoming, especially about these topics, is to give you a beginning point, to give you things that you may not even be aware of, that are even they're ideas, they're concepts that you've never been exposed to. And that's what I want to do. I want to bring those awarenesses and those exposure to you, so that way you can either learn from myself or you can go out there and seek answers from others that are living life and doing things bigger, more efficiently, let's call it that way, or let's call it that, just in a different way than maybe you're doing right now. You know something's wrong, or you know something, your life isn't necessarily living up to what you thought it should be. And my argument is that it's because of just an awareness issue. You're just not aware how to do things in a different way, which is exactly what I want to bring for you today. So hopefully you'll find value in this episode, and obviously the episodes coming up. I've got some fantastic guests coming. We're going to talk about all of this when it comes to personal development, businesses, ideas, all kinds of things. It's going to be a lot of fun. So go out there, make it a fantastic day. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and to the podcast, and share it with folks if you would. If you found value in it and you think it would help somebody else, I'd really appreciate that as well. So as I mentioned, go out there, make it a great day, and we'll look forward to connecting again real soon. Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me on the RichMind podcast. I hope you found a ton of value in this episode. If so, I'd really appreciate a 5-star review, and you can also share it with your family and friends. And as my mentor Jim Roden shared with me, in order to have more, you must first become more. And in order to become more, you must work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So go out there today and work harder on yourself to become more and build the life of your dreams. Until next time, my friends.